very often when you're presented with a new data science problem, you have all this data, you have these vague business questions, and everything seems like a bit of a blur. And then after you spend a lot of time plodding through the data and building your various models, an image starts to appear through the haziness, and to me that is really exciting.
Hi, my name is May and welcome to another edition of Mathemagicians. Today I'm joined here by the amazing Aditi. She has a degree in mathematics and an advanced degree in applied mathematics and has been working as a data scientist for just over 2 years within the world of finance. Welcome to the show, Aditi. How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. Thank you for having me here.
Awesome. Well, it's lovely to have you here. I think it's great to have someone that comes from a maths background that is now working as a data scientist and just hearing your perspective on your journey and industry. So why not start off by just walking us through the motivations as to why you chose that career path and how your career's evolved since then?
So I think I was in my second year of my master's program, and I was trying to figure out how do I take this degree and make something of it, and how do I find a career that fits this educational history that I have. And I was starting to hear about data science and how data was becoming a big thing with companies and everyone was investing so much into it. And when I started studying, kind of taking those online courses to try to see if I can teach myself how to do this, I realized that, and also from talking to people, I realized that you can have this skill in applying data science, in using data science to various industries. You can apply it to healthcare and then use similar skills and go apply that to finance, go apply that to something in the tech world. And I thought that was really interesting because that would allow me to, check out, try out, work on different types of problems, as long as they're interesting with this skill set, with this one focused skill set. So I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah. Awesome. I remember when I was graduating, I kind of was deciding, I came from a technology background and I was deciding, should I go into consulting or should I go into finance, more specifically at the time, investment banking. And, one of the reasons I chose investment banking was I felt like I'd get to learn in a more focused way about an area before I went on to consider consulting in the area.
Right.
And I was also attracted by the fact that the investment banks sort of paid the most any new graduate could, and generally the finance industry had that sort of attribute that was attractive about it. So what were your motivations specifically for finance and, as a career that you've worked in now for the last 2+ years, how has it evolved from a data science perspective and just more generally as a long-term career option to consider?
So I think when I was looking for my first ever job coming out of college, I didn't have an industry in mind. Like I said, I was just looking for interesting problems to solve because I figured with data science, you can hop around if needed. And I guess what eventually drew me to finance was that the problem I was presented with for the job that I eventually took seemed interesting to me. Also because it seemed to me that in finance, you have to account for so much of human behavior, seeing how people spend their money and how people organize themselves. So it seemed to me like there were a lot of different types of data sources that could be useful in finance. And that was, again, interesting to me.
Awesome. So how would you define your role in terms of, what types of data sets are you looking at from a very high level, of course, and what types of analysis are you doing as a data scientist to add value to the business? What is it that you deliver, generally speaking, that they couldn't do without, that really helps the business move forward?
So I deal with different types of financial data, and I would rather not go into too much detail about the specifics of that. My main role actually is to develop models, is to take the data from data prep, data cleaning, to developing a model out of that, and then I'm not that involved in the productionizing side of it, but you do have to kind of keep that in mind when you're developing the models. Another aspect of my experience in data science so far has been kind of keeping the business question in mind. Because very often your business partners, the ones who want you to solve this data science problem for them, may or may not have the background in data science, may or may not have the technical background. But so your job kind of becomes helping to translate that business question into a data science question and then communicating the results back to them, to get their feedback, to get their buy-in. And that ends up being a big part of my job, at least.
So would you say that's more about explainability or being able to sort of storytell? Like, what skill would you describe that specifically as? And how can one go about trying to improve in that area as a young data scientist, or even as an experienced data scientist? How can you develop that skill better?
I think one thing that has really helped me in that is, and this sounds kind of obvious, but it's not as easy as it might seem, because when you really, really, really understand what you're doing, so it's more than just kind of high level applying some kind of ready-made function available in Python to your project, and then you get a result, and then you package that, and that's good to go. But when you really understand what's going on in the weeds of what you're using in your code, in your math, then being able to translate that and explain that to a business stakeholder and then incorporate their feedback becomes much better.
Right. Do you think there's a benefit, if I was someone where I've worked within investment banking, say as an equity research analyst, and I decided I wanted to make a career switch and I did, a course or advanced degree, do you think that background really benefits me in terms of understanding the business and being able to sort of develop those skills that you've mentioned about explainability and being able to sort of, connect really with what the business is trying to do?
Of course. I mean, any kind of deep understanding of the business would definitely help a data scientist, for sure.
So I guess in that vein then, how would you sort of, consider someone looking at, things like MOOCs, for example, or perhaps even self-study, because there's lots of free tools and resources available, or even saying like, perhaps I've come from a liberal arts background, I want to look at something more sort of STEM focused, perhaps a statistics advanced degree. Where would you put those sort of buckets of people in terms of this is what you would suggest? What do you think from an employer's perspective is most useful? And how does it really help prepare you for a career in data science?
So, I mean, my master's degree was in applied mathematics. I didn't exactly study data science per se. So these online courses were basically how I taught myself data science. But my academic background in statistics and math really helped and has kind of been, I would say it has really helped in this case. So for anybody kind of coming into this field, trying to do data science without a background in statistics, I would say that statistics would be the biggest bottleneck to overcome, or math and statistics. Right. Before taking a out-of-the-box course in data science or in machine learning, I would say spend some time with a statistics course or a textbook and just make sure that you have that background as solid as you can get it.
Right. Awesome. So, with data science, it can still be a very blurry term in terms of what a person is specifically doing. Someone can call themselves a data scientist, and in some firms, they're really analytics people, or people might say they're hiring for a machine learning engineer, but really hoping that they also have some data science skills. So rather than talking about, what these titles mean, because they can change so much for every company, can you walk us through broadly what tasks are involved in the entire data science process, and where they fall in terms of how technical and how client-facing they can be? I
mean, just like you said, the the way companies define data science is a little arbitrary at this moment. You can be called a data science, but you're actually one data science at one company and another one somewhere else can be doing very different things. But I think on average, being a data science at the minimum involves data cleaning and data prep, involves developing some models in typically Python or R, keeping productionization of the models in mind, and at least, if nothing, communicating with some data engineers on the productionizing side of things. And of course, an overarching concept in all of this is keeping the business question in mind. Sometimes the data scientists might themselves be the ones communicating with their clients or the business partners on that business question. Sometimes you have dedicated product managers to do that. But I think that the business side of things is certainly a very core aspect of being a data scientist.
Right. So what do you think are the biggest misconceptions about working as a data scientist?
I think the field has been hyped up so much that people hear all these fantastical stories about what data science or machine learning or deep learning or AI can do, whatever these terms mean to anybody, that very often when they get on the job, they don't realize that it's far less glamorous day to day. You might spend a ridiculous amount of time just cleaning the data before you even get to any actual modeling. And then even the modeling, there's a lot of grunt work involved, a lot of it's hard work, and it does not seem glamorous. It takes a lot of time to see results sometimes, and sometimes the results are just not as exciting as you would have expected. So I think that is a big misconception.
What is the most exciting part of being a data scientist then?
I think for me, very often when you're presented with a new data science problem, you have all this data, you have these vague business questions, and everything seems like a bit of a blur. And then after you spend a lot of time plodding through the data and building your various models, an image starts to appear through the haziness. And to me, that is really exciting, to get some clarity after, being presented with the vague, hazy mess of data.
So that discovery process and actually seeing it unfold. Fascinating. So what would you then say? I know it's a tricky question, but what would you say is like the single most important skill in, wanting to be a data scientist that you really need to either possess or cultivate? And I know it's a difficult question because why should you pick one? But if you had to pick one, building your own super data science team, what would it be? What would you be looking for?
Oh, I'm going to have to say there are two.
Okay, we'll let you cheat.
That are kind of tied. I would say deep curiosity and perseverance. I think they go hand in hand.
Then I can join your team.
Yes, you can.
Right.
I think those two skills are really important.
And what way can one sort of assess whether they are deeply curious people? What are sort of like the markers for that you would look out for?
I guess if you get exhausted trying to find that needle in the haystack, if you don't feel driven by some innate curiosity to keep digging, to keep pulling the thread to see what happens, then
I like your responses because they don't focus on the technical tools, which are always changing, but those fundamental core skill sets as a person that really allow you to thrive in the career.
And that's also kind of why, right? Because the fundamental methods, the models, the algorithms, the tools can keep changing, and it's up to you to keep up with them. And for that, you have to persevere through reading all those research papers or blogs or whatever you need to read to be up to date with them, and then to just be curious about what's out there.
Absolutely. And then there is also the aspect of, a lot of people that are data scientists, usually, I think that the statistic is about 79% of data scientists in 2019 either have an advanced degree or a PhD. And there is a trend saying that it will pull backwards towards just people with degrees just becoming more and more data scientists because of all the changes that's happening. What do you think about the place of having PhDs, and how do their roles as data scientists, which tend to be more research focused, differ from the other roles that don't require PhDs, for example?
That's a little bit trickier to delve into. Obviously, having gone through a PhD, someone would probably have gone through a lot more academically rigorous work. So one would presume would be naturally better suited to tackling the more technically difficult tasks that come with data science, machine learning, all of that. So there's definitely a very high demand for technical PhDs in the industry. But on the flip side, what I've heard from PhDs is that the bottleneck that they find, and this is just what I have heard anecdotally, is that for people who spent a lot of time in school, even if it is for a really advanced degree, the bottleneck seems to be that they don't have enough business experience.
Right.
So I think people want a good mix of the two, where you have the advanced technical skills through education or whatever, but also demonstrated ability to deal with, like I've been saying, the vague business questions.
Absolutely.
And business partners and everything.
What's it like working with the business in terms of how are you? It almost sounds like you also have to sort of play a role of persuading them towards a solution. And how do you deal with that? And how have your skills improved in that area, given now that you've worked in the industry for a couple of years?
It's been interesting because I've always been someone who's been behind a book or behind a screen, or with her nose in the book, basically. And this has been a huge learning experience, which is good. I mean, I've had to develop a skill that I never focused on before.
Yeah.
Hopefully, it has grown. It's been a challenge, and it's been good.
So, you're from a math background. And, I always hear things like, data science. Is it more of a science or more of an art form? Is it more math? Is it more coding? What are your thoughts and experiences, generally speaking?
Is it more math or is it more coding? There's a lot of coding. There's a ton of coding, but there's a lot of math underlying all of that coding that you're doing. So I think, again, even for is it more for science than an art, I would say it is much more an art than you might think. So it's a healthy balance of both in both cases.
Right. And so it seems like there isn't just one type of person that is a good data scientist necessarily. Obviously, the curiosity part is very important, but people from various types of background can be quite a good sort of like blend for the industry, generally speaking. It's just those, additional skill sets of statistics and the rigor of that still need to be developed. But it explains why there are so many people across various industries more and more wanting to get into it. And obviously there's a big rise in all these boot camps online. How would you recommend, because you've been through that process as well, even though you do have an advanced degree, how would you recommend deciding what boot camps and online courses to go for and which ones are sort of like useful?
I think more than the boot camps, maybe it would be, like I said before, good to first make sure that your fundamentals in math and statistics are solid, because once you have that ability to grapple with technical language and you understand mathematical terminology and you understand the basic concepts, going through any boot camp is much easier. So I think more, like you said, there are a ton of boot camps out there, and I have obviously not sampled all of them. I'm sure there are many, many really good ones, but spending some time getting the basics of math and statistics right
absolutely
would be the best.
So do you have any sort of final words for aspiring data scientists or machine learning engineers, wherever the case may be, especially the ones that are aspiring and looking to cross over, or perhaps they're at the stage you were a couple of years ago, finishing an advanced degree, what would you advise would be the things they can do or the steps they can take to crossing over into a career like this?
Well, the industry is getting highly concentrated right now because, like you said, it's everyone seems to want to do this because it is so up and coming. Yeah, you just got to study a lot and read a lot. It's work.
Yeah, I mean, it's great. The internet is there. There's lots of resources and tools. Did you utilize things like GitHub a lot in terms of practicing, some data science projects, the practical element of it? Because obviously, yeah, you do have to read a lot. But, in that sense, what was your experience?
Try to do Kaggle challenges as much as you can, just to test yourself against other data scientists. Yeah. And instead of doing data science projects in your own little vacuum without comparing yourself to others, it's much better to do it with some kind of benchmark available.
Kaggle, that's a great one. Fantastic. Well, it's been a pleasure having you today, Aditi. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. Thank you so much for watching this episode. Please drop your comments and likes below. Do follow and share, and I'll see you on the next episode of Mathemagicians. Have a great day.